Week 2 of the COP began with amendments to Article 10.2, which encouraged greater free trade and support for developing nations. The representative from the WTO was quickly silenced by Greenpeace and its protesters. In response to the amendments to Article 10.2, the representative from Greenpeace had this to say.
Amendment 10.2. Greenpeace believes that capitalism is the cause of the climate crisis we are currently experiencing and is not the solution. This amendment is proposing free trade to deal with the effects of climate change that we are not able to cope with, and this is not a viable way to deal with them from Greenpeace's view. Thank you.
Throughout the day, speakers were frequently interrupted by the associates of Greenpeace, leaving some stakeholders to wonder if such organizations should have a place at these debates.
Point out that we are really interested in encouraging barrier-free trade of goods and services that will help us to mitigate.
Amendments to Article 9.10 were introduced following these interruptions. This created a trend the following day as nations argued the details of oversight mechanisms for funds provided to developing nations from developed states. Common points of disagreement were over the frequency of reports and the need for transparency. It is interesting that these decisions are only being made after amendments have passed that promise more funding for developed states. Arguably the leader in pressing for greater funds, Kenya supported amendments to 9.10 with this statement.
Developing countries and developed countries. It has been discussed that developed nations are hesitant with climate finances because they do not trust developing countries to use the funds properly. Encouraging more transparency would assist in alleviating tensions and these concerns. We hope that this amendment will encourage better relationships, allowing all parties to be able to achieve the goals that we are here to set up.
Day 5 began with the hotly debated amendment to Article 9.10, picking up from Monday. Delegates considered regionality and argued the possible benefits of this amendment. As these details were being brought before the COP, the delegates from the United States and China seemed to become impatient, China notably pushing for a vote given the opportunity. Surprisingly, not all developed nations opposed amendments to 9.10, although often were wary of the greater commitment given the amendments already passed at this COP. The delegate from France had this to say in regards to their trepidation.
I believe that the part that separates each country, each affected area is brilliant, but unfortunately developed countries don't feel that the financial aspect of it is beneficial to us. Particularly, we say each regional fund shall be overseen by a regional board as outlined in section 11. And then in section 11 it says the regional fund shall be overseen by boards with members located within each region. Our issue is that it would be members only of these regions. Why is it leadership can't come from developed countries?
In response to greater subsidies, the delegate from the Cato Institute had this to say. Amendments to Article 8 and Article 7.7 put forward by Brazil and the Seychelles respectively were quickly struck down in favor of discussing amendments to Article 7.6, which added language further addressing climate migrants.
This one is find it very difficult to support this amendment if it requires us to take in climate migrants. We fully support giving funds towards any climate migrants or recognizing them, but we cannot support taking in them or any amendments that require us to take in climate migrants.
Despite nations like Korea committing their support but not willing to accept migrants, both amendments to 9.10 and 7.6 were passed by the end of the day. After pushing through the amendment to Article 9.10 Friday morning, the delegates discussed Article 8.4. This amendment encouraged nations to cooperate on forced relocation tasks. This amendment resulted in a tie and therefore was not added to the agreement. Finally, the delegates moved to the final proposed amendment of the COP. A collaboration between China and the World Trade Organization, the amendment attempted to create repercussions for not meeting targets while directing funds to developing nations. This amendment, the product of a great deal of tradecraft and posturing, seemed to threaten many delegates, leaving some to wonder as to the true intentions of nations like China. In support of their amendment, a representative from the WTO stated,
We believe that it can help bridge the gap between the developed
In response to concerns about legal sanctions, China stated this.
As it states in the article, you will not receive any legal sanctions regarding the use of your finances as long as they are used appropriately. So even though the $100 billion may not get you to your emission caps or targets, you still will not be subject to those legal sanctions.
Ultimately, this addition failed without the majority support of the delegates. Finally, the nations moved to the final vote to decide the legacy of this year's COP. In the end, the delegates decided to table the document until next year's COP24. No word yet as to a unified proclamation from the voting members. Members must be left to wonder as to the necessity of this conference of the parties. From Russia Today, thank you for listening.
5 against, 4 against, and 1 abstention. This agreement